Alright, so I recently made a video, probably 2, maybe 3 weeks ago, about um, top 5 rock songs, the Christian rock songs. And while I was making that video, I made multiple references to another list that I had supposedly done of top 5 rock albums that in Christian rock, which I did previously do, but as I was going through some stuff that I have, records and things, I realized I didn't do that on YouTube. I did that on Facebook. So as I was referencing it, obviously no one has seen that content here because I didn't make that here. So um, I thought about I went through. I tried to dig up the footage from that just so I could just repost it, but I didn't because I couldn't find it. So instead of that, I'm just gonna remake that video. It might even end up being a little different. And the reason I'm gonna do that as well as a kind of a piggyback is this. You guys can't read it because it's backwards, but it's called Declaration. It's the latest album from Red, which dropped, I want to say it was April 10th. I actually waited to get it in the mail. I pre-ordered it, but I got it actually in the mail, and it's in my car CD player, and I've been listening to it like crazy. It's amazing. It's if you've been listening to their music at all, it's more like Innocence and Instinct, or like Until We All Have Faces, more so than it is like, let's say, Gone, or a Beauty and Rage. So it's a little more of their classic sound, or their original sound, but it's really good. Check it out. I think this was, I got mine on Amazon. I get just about everything on Amazon. It's worth it. It's incredible music. So, promo for them because I support them. I love them as a band. I love their material, and they're great guys. I've actually met them on a couple of different occasions. Amazing guys, amazing artists. Go check that out. So, plug aside, top 5 Christian rock albums in history. And if you don't know, so Christian rock really has been around for a long time. You have the Resurrection Band and different organizations from the right when they were right next to as secular rock was developing. It was right alongside it, but it didn't get a lot of mainstream attraction to it because of the fact that the Satanic Panic, the 80s, and things like that were saying that if you're involved with that sounding music, which Loudwire has a really great video on why that is. There's a specific sequence of notes known as the devil music, or the devil sound, that rock music that tends to use a lot. And so that's part of it, but a large part of it is the fact that just people don't like change, and Christian music has mostly been inspired or referential from country, bluegrass, and those sort of roots instead. And once you're in a track, it's like rails. Once you're on a track, you're going that direction. Rock music was going in a very different direction than they were, and they didn't want to change. So, but in the 90s, there was a couple of major bands that came along that just took the world by storm, or the market by storm in Christian music. And so, number 5 that I want to mention is Satellite by POD, which I used a different album in the first one, and I'm aware of that. But I wanted to use Satellite because Satellite has 4 major tracks, but the Satellite doesn't count because it didn't really make all that much of a splash. Um, three major tracks that came off as singles, made videos that are kind of popular. Youth of the Nation, which I mentioned in that other video about songs as like kind of a runner-up, is in that video, is on this album, and it's definitely their biggest album. And um, so, as far as like Youth of the Nation alone deserves a major mention simply on this list because their sound is unique. It's not like if you listen to the album Satellite, you notice that as far as some of their Hispanic roots and things. But um, incredible album, well mixed, and as far as a band, if you've never seen them live, you need to do that. So number 4 that I want to mention, as far as albums that are concerned, had a hard time placing number 4 um, in the previous video simply because the top 3 are easy. Number 5, kind of a throwaway, but number 4, I ended up actually just having a second album from Red, which I'm changing that more than anything. What I've decided to go with is a kind of, it's not as big as the other bands necessarily in this list, but there's this little band called, I shouldn't call them that, but it was called East West. Old rock band. They don't exist anymore. They're not like their music isn't even on YouTube or places like that very much. They're just they made a splash and they kind of gone, but they made a huge impact in what music would sound like in the future. There's a lot of influence in them from Decipher Down, from Fireflight, from Flyleaf, from Skillet, from Thousand. Like you can hear them in there all the time, like very deeply entrenched in that. But they didn't really make much of a stirring themselves. And so it's called Light in Guinevere's Garden by a band called East West. And like I said, they're really, you can't really find anything even to say that they did definitely exist all that much. But the influence of that album and the influence of that music throughout the remainder of just Christian music all over, like, it's everywhere. If you've heard their sound and you've heard any Christian rock music since, then you know what I'm talking about. So that's who I did number 4, just that the amount of influence, despite the fact that they didn't really get the respect they deserved from it. Number 3 is from a band that changed my mind about this band. And like I mentioned before, like I didn't really like 1,000 Foot Crutch all that much at first. Their original, like, Set It Off was a good album, and the song Puppet, the music video for Puppet were amazing, but I just didn't dig it. Phenomenon was alright, just not my sound, just wasn't for me. No hate, just wasn't for me. Well, when The Art of Breaking came out with its first lead-off single, Move, changed my entire outlook of this band. And I've been a fan of theirs ever since. I've seen them live. They're incredible. They do a really good show. And I'd seen them live a couple of times before this album came out. And I was like, they're great and everything. I don't, like, one of those of that, yeah, they play a good show, but I'm not a fan. But ever since that album dropped, I've been in love with them. Basically, when they come out with new music, I'm usually right there with it. I get updates. I love them. And so I've seen them live since then as well. I mean, Oxygen Inhale, Oxygen Exhale, like, The Light in All of Us, like, it's really changed my mind about them. And so simply that alone, like, I usually get entrenched on stuff that if that's like, oh well, whatever, I don't really care anymore, once I've got an opinion set up on something. But in this instance, they completely turned my mindset upside down. So respect to them for that, and there it is. So that was number 3. Number 2 is Memento Mori by Flyleaf, which is an amazing album. It's got a lot of really great tracks on it. There are other albums of theirs that I could mention. Their launch album. There's several of them that I could say like that are good as well. There's a lot of great tracks from all those other albums, but this one specifically, if you've heard it, the way it's composed and the content that it talks about is incredible. And of course, Lacey Sturm is an incredible vocalist, and just the way their bass line just melts faces. Like, if you know, you know, and if you don't know what you're missing. So that's number 2. And I talked about before in the previous video on tracks just simply how much of a major impact Flyleaf has had on Christian rock and Christian music scene and stuff. Like, they're an incredible group of people, and they're an incredible group of artists as well. So there's that. That's number 2. Number 1 is possibly the greatest Christian rock album that's ever been made, and it is Comatose by Skillet, which when I made this first one, people were like, man, even after that, it's been out for more than a decade. It's been out for a long time in music years, and yet people are like, that album is still in my CD changer, and I still listen to it all the time. And youth pastors, like every single youth pastor has at least one song from Comatose still in their youth group, like Dodgeball Mix and stuff. Like, it has made an everlasting impact on music, because Collide and Alien Youth and these songs, like, those are great, and without them, we, like, who knows where we would be musically and stuff. So, but that's where Skillet really came into what it is now. And then after that, you've got Awake and Rise and all these other albums that have made such critical, like, kind of market success and influence and stuff. But none of them quite, like, as far as that one. Like, it was a perfect album, and the way that the tracks in it are kind of laid out, and the way it's composed, and the way it's got all the orchestration and stuff, like, it is an amazing piece of music, and I would highly recommend it to anyone. I have 2 versions. I've got the studio album, I've got the live tour album with the DVD attached. Like, it is an incredible, which, if you don't know, when they did that, the Comatose tour, they toured with Thousand Foot Crutch as well, so, and Cypher Down. And that was an incredible concert. Unfortunately, Skillet and Thousand Foot Crutch are they're too big to really put together on a single tour anymore, but that was an amazing experience. And if you were there, you know that. So, that's my top 5 of Christian rock albums, and I don't know, you can fight me in the comments.